Sidney Poitier was offered a role that would win him an Oscar. He read the script. And then he did something that shocked Hollywood. He turned it down. It was spring 1967, and Sidney Poitier sat in a conference room at Columbia Pictures. Across from him sat the studio head, the director, and his own agent. On the table lay a script that everyone in the room believed would be his ticket to a second Academy Award. The role was substantial, the story was powerful, and the money was exceptional. "Sidney," the studio head said, leaning forward with barely contained enthusiasm, "this is the role of a lifetime. Complex character, award-worthy material, and you'd be the undisputed lead. We're looking at a major Oscar campaign." Sidney's hands rested on the script. He'd read it twice the night before, once quickly and once slowly, paying attention not just to his character but to how that character fit into the larger story. And he'd found something that troubled him deeply. "Can I ask you something about the character?" Sidney said quietly. "Of course," the director replied. "Anything." Sidney opened the script to a marked page. "In the third act, my character makes a decision that essentially saves the white protagonist. He sacrifices his own goals, his own dignity, to ensure the white character succeeds." The director nodded eagerly. "Exactly. It's a beautiful moment of selflessness. It shows the depth of your character's nobility." Sidney was quiet for a moment. "Or," he said carefully, "it shows that even in a film where I'm supposedly the lead, my character's purpose is still to serve the white character's journey." The room shifted uncomfortably. Sidney continued, his voice calm but firm. "I've read this script carefully. My character is intelligent, capable, and strong. But every major decision he makes, every crucial moment, is designed to elevate the white character. I'm not the protagonist. I'm the noble helper. And I've played that role too many times already." His agent jumped in quickly. "Sidney, this is different. Your character has real depth here, real complexity. This isn't like those smaller roles. You're above the title. Your name comes first." Sidney looked toward his agent. "James, having your name above the title doesn't matter if the story underneath it is the same. I'd rather have a smaller role in a film that treats my character as fully human than a leading role in a film that treats me as a narrative device to make white audiences feel good about race." The studio head's expression hardened. "Mr. Poitier, with all due respect, you're reading too much into this. This is a story about friendship, about transcending differences. That's a positive message. Is it?" Sidney asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, it's a story about a black man who has to prove his worth by serving a white man. Again. That's not transcendence. That's the same dynamic we've always had, just dressed up in better dialogue. But here's what nobody in that room understood yet. Sidney wasn't rejecting the film out of ego or difficulty. He was protecting something far more important than his career." The director tried a different approach. "Sidney, I understand your concerns, but think about the impact. Millions of people will see this film. They'll see you as a leading man. That visibility matters. It does matter, Sidney agreed. Which is exactly why I have to be careful about what I'm visible doing. Because every role I take sends a message to young black actors, to young black audiences, about what's possible and what's acceptable. And I won't send the message that our purpose is still to serve. His agent looked desperate now. Sidney, if you turn this down, the studio is going to remember. Other offers might dry up. You could be blacklisted for being difficult. Then I'll be blacklisted, Sidney said simply. But I won't compromise on this. Not anymore. The studio head stood abruptly. Mr. Poitier, you're making a mistake. This role could cement your legacy. Sidney stood as well. My legacy isn't going to be built on how many Oscars I win. It's going to be built on whether I had the courage to say no when saying yes would have hurt the people coming after me. He picked up the script and handed it back to the director. Thank you for thinking of me. But I can't do this. As Sidney walked toward the door, the director called out. Who do you think you are? You think you can afford to turn down roles like this? You think Hollywood needs you more than you need Hollywood? Sidney stopped. He turned back. No, he said quietly. I don't think Hollywood needs me more than I need it. But I do think I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror more than I need another role. And right now, if I take this part, I won't be able to do that. He left. And the room sat in stunned silence. Word spread quickly through Hollywood. Sidney Poitier had turned down a guaranteed Oscar role. Some people called it career suicide. Others called it arrogance. But a few people, the ones who understood what Sidney was actually doing, they called it revolutionary. Because Sidney wasn't just turning down a role. He was drawing a line. Wait, this is where it gets important. Sidney's refusal had consequences nobody expected. The studio, furious at his rejection, did exactly what his agent had warned. They started a quiet campaign suggesting Sidney was difficult to work with, that he was ungrateful, that he had an inflated sense of his own importance. For 6 months, no major offers came. His agent called less frequently. Industry people who used to greet him warmly at events suddenly became distant. But then something else started happening. Young black actors, the ones who were just starting to get opportunities in Hollywood, they started seeking Sidney out. They'd heard about what he'd done, and they wanted to understand why. One young actor named Clarence Williams sat with Sidney at a small restaurant in Los Angeles. Mr. Poitier, he said, I heard you turned down the Patterson role. Everyone's saying you're crazy. Maybe I am, Sidney replied with a slight smile. Clarence leaned forward. But why? Why turn down something that could have won you another Oscar? Sidney thought for a moment. Clarence, let me ask you something. If I had taken that role, and won an Oscar for playing another noble black man whose purpose is to help a white protagonist succeed, what would that have told you about what's possible for you? Clarence didn't have an answer. Sidney continued. It would have told you that even at the highest level, even with an Oscar, even with my name above the title, I'm still playing the helper. I'm still the supporting character in someone else's story. And if I accept that, why would any studio give you something different? Why would they let you be the actual protagonist if they know that even Sidney Poitier will settle for being the noble sidekick? Clarence was quiet, processing. So you turned it down for us? For the actors coming after you? Sidney shook his head. I turned it down for me. Because I have to live with my choices. But yes, I also thought about you. About all the young black actors who are going to come after me. I thought about what message I wanted to send. And the message I wanted to send was this: don't settle. Don't accept roles that diminish you just because they come with prestige or money. Demand better. And if they won't give you better, walk away. That's how we change this industry. Not by being grateful for crumbs, but by refusing to eat until they give us a seat at the table. Clarence sat back. Man, that's heavy. Sidney smiled. It is. But somebody has to carry it. And right now, because of where I am, I have the ability to carry it. So I will. That conversation, and others like it, started to shift something in Hollywood. Not immediately. Not dramatically. But slowly, young black actors started turning down roles that diminished them. Started demanding rewrites. Started walking away from projects that treated them as narrative devices rather than full human beings. And producers, faced with a generation of actors who refused to accept the old dynamics, started creating different kinds of roles. It didn't happen overnight. But it happened. And it started with Sidney Poitier saying no in that conference room. Years later, in 1982, Sidney was being interviewed for a television special about his career. The interviewer asked, "Do you regret turning down the Patterson role? You never won that second Oscar." Sidney smiled. You know, everyone assumes that if I'd taken that role, I would have won. But that's not guaranteed. What is guaranteed is that if I'd taken it, would have reinforced a dynamic that's been hurting black actors for decades. So no, I don't regret it. The interviewer pressed. But wasn't it hard? Weren't you scared about what would happen to your career? Of course I was scared, Sidney said. I'm human. But I learned a long time ago that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else matters more than fear. And for me, integrity mattered more. Being able to respect myself mattered more. Contributing to a better future for black actors mattered more. So yes, I was scared. But I said no anyway. That interview became legendary among actors. It was quoted, referenced, taught in acting schools. Because Sidney had articulated something that many people felt but couldn't express. That sometimes the most important performance isn't on screen. It's in the choices you make about what you won't perform. Here's what Sidney Poitier understood that day in the conference room, and what every person in any field needs to understand. Your career is not just about you. Whether you want it to be or not, if you're successful, if you're visible, if you have any kind of platform, your choices send messages to everyone watching. And you have a responsibility to think about what messages you're sending. Sidney could have taken that role. He could have won another Oscar. His career would have continued, probably even flourished. But what would it have cost? Not just him, but every black actor who came after him. Every young person who would have watched that film and learned, once again, that even the most successful black actors are still in service to white narratives. Sidney refused to pay that cost. Not because he was a saint. Not because he didn't care about success. But because he understood that some successes are actually failures in disguise. Some opportunities are actually traps. Some honors are actually insults dressed in praise. And the ability to recognize that, to turn down what looks good because you understand what it actually means, that's wisdom. That's integrity. That's the kind of courage that changes industries and cultures and futures. So here's the lesson, and it applies to everyone regardless of your field or your position. When you're offered something that looks like an opportunity but feels wrong, trust that feeling. When you're presented with a chance to advance your career but the cost is your integrity or the well-being of your community, say no. When you're told you should be grateful for an opportunity that actually diminishes you, refuse it. Because your choices matter. Your decisions send messages. Your refusals shape what's possible for the people coming after you. Sidney Poitier knew this. And he made the hard choice. The unpopular choice. The choice that cost him in the short term but created space for countless others in the long term. He turned down the Oscar. And in doing so, he won something more valuable. The respect of people who understood what he was actually doing. The gratitude of generations of actors who benefited from his refusal. The legacy of being someone who wouldn't compromise, even when compromise would have been easier and more profitable. That's power. That's influence. That's the kind of success that actually matters. So the next time you're faced with an opportunity that looks perfect but feels wrong, remember Sidney Poitier in that conference room. Remember that he walked away from an Oscar because he understood what accepting it would cost. And ask yourself, what matters more? The short-term gain or the long-term impact? The applause now or the respect later? The career advancement or the integrity that lets you sleep at night? Sidney chose integrity. And decades later, his choice is still teaching us what real courage looks like. Live by that. Honor it. And when your moment comes, when you're offered something that looks like success but smells like compromise, do what Sidney did. Stand up. Say no. And walk away knowing that sometimes the greatest success is the opportunity you refused. That's the lesson. That's the legacy. That's the courage that changes everything.